BrokersBloc. You want to learn how to do a better job? You want to learn how to be a better broker? Or if your employer finds solutions maybe you're not seeing, this is a show you want to listen to. Coming up today, our guest from BrokersBloc.
And now, America's healthcare advocate, Carrie Hall.
Hello, America. Welcome to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HI Radio Network. You can find out more about us by going to our website, americashealthcareadvocate.com. Also, all these shows are up on 16 podcast platforms and our YouTube channel. By the way, we're up to 653,000 views. Thanks to all of you out there in the audience and all of you listening across the country to our 243 affiliates. We appreciate all of you on terrestrial radio. Joining me in studio today, Stephen Combs and Marc Wiersma. They are here from BrokersBloc. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks
you get to be a pro at this now. So you've done this 2 or 3 times now. So
yeah, I always look forward to it.
Yeah. So why don't we just start off by a little bit about, what you're doing at BrokersBloc. I mean, you guys are constantly changing and improving and adding different opportunities, but it's not just for brokers. This is information that you're sharing out there for employers that, could make a big difference. We did a workshop here a couple of weeks ago with a group of folks, and they were individual brokers that didn't write group health insurance. So what do we do? We get this group client. We don't know what to do with it. So let's talk a little bit about how if an employer is not happy, and where can they reach out? Can they get help? And then just overall, what is it you guys are doing in the marketplace now, Stephen?
Absolutely, yeah. So we vet our insurance carriers very heavily, but we also inadvertently vet our brokers as well. We don't work with just anybody. So our broker partners are the best in the market. So what we're actually doing is creating a broker directory so that if a group needs to shop their broker along with their health plan, we've already done all the homework for them. So we just need to ask a few questions about what it is their needs are, what they're looking for, and we can place them with a very high quality local broker for them.
And that's important because they don't want, when you're not in this business, how do you know? Okay. When you're the employer, you're the human resource director, you're the ones responsible for finding, look, we're really unhappy with this guy or gal we've got. They're not doing the job. It's funny because that's exactly what I heard when I was doing this lunch and learn that we did a couple of weeks ago on gig care. And these were all people that wrote individual. They didn't want to do group, but they were getting calls from people saying our employer's unhappy with the group. Where do they go? And they did not know where to go.
I mean, it's hard even if you do a Google search, it's hard to find where brokers are even at. It's hard to find what they do. And you can ask them a couple of questions, but at the end of the day, everyone's going to say we have the best customer service, we have the lowest prices, but
it's not always about the lowest prices, Stephen. You know that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. It's about benefits and pricing. And if you leave that benefits portion out and all you're doing is shopping pricing, you're probably going to do something that's not going to work out all that well for you.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, that's why you have to have quality benefits that are affordable, right? But you're right. The price should not be the leading indicator. Of course, you want to be competitive, but the benefits have to be quality as well.
Yeah, they do. And that's the responsibility of the broker to do just that. And then the employer asks the question, well, how do I know? I went out and found this guy on Google or LinkedIn or wherever the case may be, and they sound good, but how do I really know? And what you're doing basically is taking the guesswork out of that.
Exactly. I mean, we have experience with these brokers and the business they've written with us. And look, our broker partners have carriers that we don't represent, and that's totally fine. We're not bringing them in saying, hey, you have to write this with us. Shop all of your markets, and if there's a better fit outside of us, I recommend that you do that. But we're here to help the employers find those quality brokers that will look at all the options, dig underneath every single rock, and make sure that no stone is left unturned for them.
Yeah, and try to match up somebody that's going to understand their needs, whether it's a 10 life group or a 100 life group or 1,000 life group. You're looking for, those are all different categories. So you're looking to find a broker who really, maybe it's a broker that all they do is small group. And they're really good at 1 to 25 or 1 to 50. Now you switch gears and you go to somebody that's got 100 lives or 200 lives. Well, have you looked at self-funded? And oftentimes the employer go, well, what does that mean? I don't know if I want to do that. That's scary. But if you have the right broker, talk about how that can make a difference. And they understand what knowledge is critical to making a decision. If they don't have the knowledge, you can't make a good decision, Stephen.
Oh, I completely agree. And that's why our brokers, I mean, they vary greatly. We have brokers that are really boutique, small group brokers, smaller shops, but do wonderful work. And we have a handful of national brokers that can handle, any account that you can imagine. And you're absolutely right is, if it's a group that self-funding makes a lot of sense, you want to make sure you have a broker that really knows what you need, because self-funding and level funding is a great way to control cost. But you have to understand the nuance, the compliance, and make sure that going into it what it is that you're purchasing.
Yeah, you also have to know the risk.
Yes.
Level funded sounds really good for the first couple of years, and then that bad claims you're hitting, what do you do?
Yep.
Okay, and you had to have a broker that understands that.
Not only that, but understands the different contracts, right? There's so many different contracts out there with the actual run out, right? Making sure that you have enough run out. Are the administrative fees built in? Is my claims fund being funded properly? A lot of these carriers out there, they underfund the claims bucket dramatically so that the group never gets a surplus, and then they can justify a 20% increase year after year. You're basically fully insured at that point. So making sure that the contract benefits the employer, not just year 1, but year 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Well, that's got a lot to do with the broker.
Yes.
And the character of the broker, okay? Yep. Because if the broker's selling, we just talked about this, they're selling price, okay, and they're promising you on level premium, the surplus is going to go back to you. It's going to apply to next year's. But in reality, that's not going to happen. They should know that. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's very easy to look at a contract and see, wow, this is funding 90% towards stop loss and administration, 10% towards claims. It doesn't take a mathematician to know that's probably not going to work out long term.
Yeah, it's probably not going to work out long term. But again, that's the responsibility of the broker.
Absolutely.
To do that and present to the employer and to do what they need to do. And unfortunately, that doesn't always happen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, most of the plans being sold today, level funded, are funded underneath that arrangement. So it happens a lot.
Yeah, it does. And the unfortunate part of it is the blowback comes to the employer, who then has to go back to his employees and change the plans and do this or do that or to adjust for the overall cost. And it really doesn't work out. So we're going to come back from the break here in a few minutes. We're going to continue this conversation. We'll talk with Mark about some of the things that they're doing out there to attract brokers into their program and how you as an employer, if you're not happy, what can you do to change that? Well, we'll talk about all of that. We'll be right back after the break. The website is BrokersBloc.com. BrokersBloc.com. I was just up there this morning. They've changed it again, added some things to it. It's a great website with a ton of information. You're an HR director, you're a broker, you're an employer. You might want to take a look at that. It could make a difference. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA. Stay right there. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA on all of our stations across the country. Want to give a little shout out, WABC 1340 in Dalton, Georgia. Been with us for quite a while. Great people down there. We're very happy to be on the air and have them as part of America's Healthcare Advocate family. Once again, as I said, all these shows are up on our podcast platform. So if you want to tell somebody about this, maybe you're a human resource director and you guys are not happy with your broker, you want to go to the boss and say, we need to make a change. These people can help you do that. They're the people from BrokersBloc. The website is BrokersBloc.com. In studio with me today, Stephen Combs and Marc Wiersma. They are here from BrokersBloc to talk about what they're doing and how they're doing it. So, Marc, let's just talk about, you're kind of new on board here, but your background, what you're doing, and how you're allowing some of these brokers to do a better job of what they should be doing.
Yeah,
Marc?
Thanks, Kerry. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, so I've worked about 35 years in the employee benefits space, and I've always worked for giant insurance companies. So
that's unfortunate.
Well, yeah, in retrospect. No, it's actually been great to get the experience, to get the training, to get the knowledge and relationships in the marketplace. So I met Stephen about 6-7 months ago, and he explained to me what BrokersBloc was about, and it really lined up with what I'm passionate about. So I really have a lot of compassion for brokers and for groups in the small group space. It's been an undervalued, underserved space for as long as I've been in the business. And so I wanted to bring my experience and knowledge to brokers to help them become more efficient, to bring better value to their clients, and to kind of demystify the space, right? To help them understand that it's not that scary to go
it is actually scary if you're the employer in human resources trying to make a decision.
Can be. Yes.
It's going to affect, you've got 50 employees, maybe you've only got 10 employees. But the point is, if they don't understand, as we talked about in the last block, knowledge is power. If they don't have, that's the responsibility of the broker, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. And so these groups are every bit as important as our largest groups in terms of our employment population, as far as incomes and livelihood, all of these things. We need to take care of our small group employers. So that's really why I jumped into BrokersBloc, was to bring that consultative experience that I have and help them navigate this kind of scary world of level funding, right? There's solutions out there nobody's ever heard of before. We're bringing those solutions, but then helping brokers explain those to their clients. We're helping to make sure they don't step into the holes that you can step into. Stephen mentioned this earlier. We've kind of learned quite a bit about the space that we can share through BrokersBloc.
It's funny because I look back, I've been doing this for 27 years, not quite as long as you. I came in a little later to the game, but I remember when level premium first came out, and there was one particular carrier who I will not bother to name, who came in with these remarkable prices, and we had some groups up in Minnesota. We had some groups in other places. And we wrote the policies. And the first year kind of went okay. The second year, we started seeing increases of 70%, 100%, all the rest of it. And then it dawned, because this is right when this first started years ago, it dawned on me that, okay, this is what's going on here. They're coming in and lowballing this in the first year, 2 years. And then the minute a claims hit, they'll renew you, because they couldn't say they're not going to renew you. They renew you. They just push the premium up 700% or 70% or 100%. And then obviously the broker had to run. And that happened to us 3 or 4 times. And at that point, I'm like, we're done with these guys.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it was a game. Now, you learn through experience, but when you see that kind of thing, that behavior, then it's incumbent upon you as the broker. And I assume you guys, part of what Stephen and all of you are doing, Ryan and everybody else in the company, is you're vetting these things before they become something that you're willing to put out there and promote on your platforms to the brokers that work with you.
Right. Yeah. Buying business is not a long-term strategy, right? It's going to come to roost, right? So a good example, the first account that I placed here in the Kansas City market received proposals in from our various carrier network. And we got one that looked really, really good, too good, right? So I picked up the phone. I called the producer, who I've known for many years. And I said, hey, I've got a phenomenal offer for you, but I'm concerned, right? When they come in that far below the renewal, and they're an outlier, right? There weren't other bids that looked like it. And I said, let's really look at this thing and decide what is the appropriate pricing for your client. And so we looked at it and we talked about it, and we went back to the carrier and we negotiated a higher price than what they initially offered. It was still very competitive and very attractive for the client, but we actually built in some cost to it, but in the claims funding, not the fixed, because the fixed, the employer can never participate in that, in their surplus, right?
Correct.
So it could run great and the insurance carrier keeps all of the money. So when we put money back into it, we put it into the claims funding so that if it does perform well, the employer will get the benefit of that. And
it also reduced their risk.
It does. So, a level funded plan technically doesn't have immediate risk, right? Because it's
technically.
Right, exactly. But the risk of taking a low rate and then having a huge increase the next time around, it really plays havoc with your budgeting
Not only that, what do employees hate to hear? We're changing carriers next year.
Exactly.
And that comes from taking something like that at face value, not doing the deep dive to understand, why does this look as good as it looks in comparison to everybody? What is it that these guys have got, these other, and you're looking going, well, actually nothing. It's the way they structured this thing. Yeah. So that we're back to that selling price over benefit. Mm-hmm. And then, as you just said, when the chickens come home to roost, and we get that 37, 47, 57% increase, it's like, also, if you're the broker in that situation, they're looking at you like, why did you sell me this? Why did you put me in this position?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's a lose-lose for everybody.
Yes. Well, a big issue you run into it when that happens as well is, and you get those 50, 60% increases, a lot of carriers will look at that and say, something's going on in this group, and then DTQ it.
And that
is
a huge issue.
Huge risk.
And so here's what we're going to do. That was a really interesting point Stephen brought up. We're going to come back after the break, and we're going to talk about why that's like a blacklist, okay? You know, when you go to the next carrier, we'll talk about this when we come back and why you need to pay attention to that and why your broker needs to pay attention to it. And if they're not doing their job. So the website is BrokersBloc.com, BrokersBloc.com. You know, go up there. They've got a lot of information up there. You're the broker. If you're an employer or a human resource director, take a look at these guys and see what they can do. They're totally transparent. They actually, do a lot of the work to help the brokers. As you just heard Mark say, they went out and they got all of the proposals, pulled them together, and then they came back to the broker and evaluated those. That is a much better way to do this, okay, especially if you're the broker out there and you've got a lot of these small groups. This is a great way to do this. It's going to make a lot of sense to you. Once again, the website is BrokersBloc.com, BrokersBloc.com. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HIA Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIA Radio Network. You're listening to this, you're intrigued. You think, maybe what we're doing is not all that in a bag of chips. Well, maybe you ought to go to the website and take a look at these people. They really know what they're doing. They're very good at it. You're the broker out there. You're juggling 15, 20 groups. You're trying to do the renewals and everything else on. Wouldn't it be nice to have a partner that can really do something to help you? That's BrokersBloc. They can make a big difference. And if you're the employer, you're the human resource director, you're unhappy, you're looking for a solution, they can give you a list of brokers that they know they're working with that are going to do what's supposed to be done the right way and not try to sell you something because it's in their best interest to sell it. They're going to do something that makes sense for you and create a long-term relationship. Their website is BrokersBloc.com, BrokersBloc.com. So this was interesting. You mentioned this when we went off the air. This used to happen constantly. You got a 15 life group, 20 life group, 50 life group. They got a bad increase. Okay, we got to go shop. And what is it? Well, we need to see your claims data. What's your renewal rate? Well, we can't get the claims data. Well, what's your renewal? Oh, it's 37%. Red flag. Yep. Carrier goes, we don't want that group. This isn't an ACA, people. This is level funded and self-funded. We don't want that group. They've got a bad claims history. Talk about that because that happens.
Mm-hmm. That to me is the biggest risk of underfunding your claims bucket, and that's why you're almost better off increasing rates a little bit to give you a little bit of a buffer. Because what will happen is all these carriers are going to see that you had a massive claims year and you had a huge renewal because you ran high on your claims because they were underfunded, and they're not even going to make you an offer. They're just going to decline to quote. So you might have gotten, 7 or 8 quality offers, whereas now you're only getting 2 or 3.
And they might not be quality.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And so you're in a box.
Yes.
And it's a box that should have been anticipated, okay, by the broker that put that plan in place. Now, there are situations where no one has control. Somebody has a medical event, a heart attack, a stroke, or something along those lines. That's something you cannot control. But you also have to understand what that means whenever it comes time for that. If that does happen, how do you tackle that? How do you deal with it? So what do you guys do in a situation like that? Somebody comes to you, broker comes to you, employer comes to you and says, we just got whacked, okay? And we can't get anybody to talk to us. I mean, we got 2 carriers here, but their rates are going to be horrible. The benefits, we're going to have to raise deductibles, raise copays, cost shift to our employees. That's going to piss the employees off. You're going to have a big problem. How do you guys deal with a situation like that?
So the funny thing is most brokers, when they first engage with us, it's because they're in that situation.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Guess what? I'm in trouble. Mommy, come help me.
Some help. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So most brokers, I mean, they're not going to give you a shot on their whole block or their best business, and they really shouldn't. You got to test people out, and usually it's the challenging cases. And I will say you're not completely out of luck if you're in that scenario. It's about understanding what's going on. You need to understand, okay, who are the claimants? Are they still there? Are the conditions still there? Was it a shock claim? Were the claims underfunded? If we can see the buckets, we have some data to make an argument to our carriers of, sure, they ran hot, sure, they got a big increase. However, the claims were underfunded.
Go back to what you just said. What if they're out? What if they're gone?
Yeah.
What if they went on Cobra and now they're on Cobra? They're paying the premium. The employer's not paying it anymore. The risk is being handled. So if they're off the plan.
Yep.
Okay. So how much of a difference does that make? And the carriers don't. I mean, the people that are going to bid, the carriers that are bidding, they don't know that.
Well, Cobra members sometimes are the ones screwing up the renewal.
Very much so.
And there's some solutions out there. There's some vendors out there that obviously you can't force members to jump off Cobra. But a lot of times, even though the ACA subsidies did, change, there's still a lot of times when the ACA plans are more competitive than what your Cobra rates are.
Well, and here's the thing that employees don't get until the time that it happens. You go on Cobra, you're paying, my portion of the plan. I'm paying the employer's portion of the plan, and I'm paying another 1 or 2% on top of that.
Yep.
So you're eating the whole enchilada, which is not what you signed up for. So really, when that happens and you go back to that employer and say, I want to talk to these people that are on Cobra, and you show them, hey, if you go on ACA, it's $500 a month less than what you got right now, and it's a better plan or as good a plan, and you're not going to lose anything. You've done them a service. You've done the employer service. Now connect the dots. You go back to the carrier and say they're off. Now what can we do? Exactly.
I mean, because think about the people taking Cobra. Sure, there's a handful that they just want the peace of mind to have the insurance. But most people on Cobra, there's a reason why they're okay with paying 102% of the premium.
100%.
And it's because they're going to be high utilizers.
Yep. Yeah. And they've either got an ongoing comorbidity issue that's causing a huge problem.
Yep.
Okay. Or they've got somebody in their family with the same issue, and they feel like they can't get off.
Yep.
I may be paying $1,200 a month for this or $2,000 a month, but I can't get off because the medical bills are going to be $200,000. But if they move over to ACA with no underwriting and get immediate coverage, boom, that all goes away. Now maybe they're only paying $600, $700, $800 a month, and they've got as good or better than coverage.
Yep, exactly. A lot of people they just don't even think about it. They don't even realize that that's even an option. So it's not because they're trying to stay on the group plan because they maybe think it's better. Maybe they do think it's better. But if they can look at the other options, a lot of times they can get something a lot more competitive.
Yeah, and that's really what, as Mark just talked about, that's what you guys are doing, is you're bringing them the whole picture.
Yes.
Because you have access to Peaches. I mean, you're working now with some of the different networks, HPN, the Blue Cross Network. Yes. Talk about that a little bit, because that, again, that's access, and that's critical.
Yeah, so we added on a new carrier partner. The TPA is called Array Health. They have access to the Blue Cross High Performance Network. It can get very aggressive on cost. It's a little bit more narrow than the Blue PPO, but it's still the Blue Cross Network, and it's nationwide.
It can be a little bit more narrow, but if it still gives them access to great carriers, great providers and great hospitals, they don't need the full PPO network. So that can make a huge difference. That's like an EPO, am I right?
It is. Now, there are some providers in some markets that don't take it. So that's why we're always cautious whenever we're shopping a health plan, and we're making sure that all the necessary providers are in network. So we'll recommend it when it makes sense, and we won't when it doesn't.
So even if they're not in the network, if there's an alternative provider inside that network they can move to,
yes,
that could make the difference, and it allows them. It affects everybody in the plan and allows the cost to come down based on the fact that you're doing something that affects everybody in the plan.
Exactly. There are some markets to where there's a provider that you just have to have, right? And in those scenarios, it can be a knockout. But you're right. If there's multiple providers and you can make a switch, then yes, it could still make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's really kind of what you're trying to do, isn't it? To give them options that are going to make sense. Maybe those are options that broker doesn't know about, that employer certainly doesn't know about.
Yeah.
That could make a big difference for them.
Yeah, for the right broker and the right group, absolutely. And speaking of networks, we have a lot of regional networks as well. I mean, we have access to HealthLink in St. Louis and Illinois. Very popular network over there.
I used to use that actually when I was a broker, and I used it in Illinois. That's really funny that you brought that up because it was a great network.
Yep, we have networks like that all across the country. So
again, it's having access that can make a difference. It can lower the cost, but not lower the benefits to the folks that are actually on the plan, because that's the challenge that the broker faces.
Exactly. What I like about those networks as well is, they have their tier 1 network, right? But then if you have employees outside of the state, or let's say that you have kids in college, they have a tier 2 network as well. Same benefits. It's just if you're out of the state, this is the network that they gravitate towards. And our carriers have First Health. Some of them actually have Blue Cross as their secondary network.
That's remarkable. You don't see that very often.
Yeah.
And that Blue Cross is kind of like the American Express Platinum card.
Yeah, it is.
At least that's how people view it, Mark.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. I mean, there's some really, Aetna's a really good carrier. I'm not a big fan of United. I'm sorry, I never have been. Mm-hmm. But, you look at Aetna, Cigna, and Blue Cross, and Blue Cross is kind of like like I said, it's the American Express Platinum card, and it can make a big difference.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Whenever we hear Blue Cross, our ears perk. When we hear a TPA partner has access, we get excited.
Yeah, that's just like Tatego with our access to Blue Cross. It's a big difference. So the website, if you want to learn more, BrokersBloc.com, BrokersBloc.com. There's a lot of information up there, and they really can make a difference. I mean, we work with a lot of different brokers around the country, and the folks that work with them, like John Coleman and some of the other brokers they work with, these folks know what they're doing. It's a good place to take a look at what it is and how can it benefit you and how can it benefit your clients. Again, the website, BrokersBloc.com, BrokersBloc.com. We'll be right back after the break. We're going to wrap it up, but we're going to talk a little bit about ancillary benefits now. This is one that kind of gets away from people sometimes. We're going to talk about how they do that and what they do and how that can make a difference. Stay tuned. We're coming back right after the break here on America's Healthcare Advocate. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIA Radio Network. Once again, you're listening to this. You want to tell somebody about it or share it with somebody in your company, go to the podcast platforms. There's 16 of them. Apple and a couple of the others now are actually allowing us to put video up. So not only do we have it on the YouTube channel, it's also on a number of the podcast channels now. So the podcast channels are now adding video in some cases. So I think it's Spotify and Apple that are allowing us to do it now. So again, all the shows are up there. And this particular one, if interests you or can help you, this is a great place to go look at it. In studio with me from BrokersBloc is Stephen Combs and Marc Wiersma. And we're talking about what they do, how they do it, how it affects employers, and how it affects brokers, and how brokers can do a better job with their resources using these folks. So let's talk about ancillary, because this is one where it kind of gets away from people sometimes. And unfortunately, a lot of times, I think it's more driven by who can make the sale than it is by what is the real benefit. So let's just talk about that. And that's a trap that sometimes employers fall into, and then they find out this really didn't work out like we thought it was going to work out. I mean, they bring in a claim, somebody goes on disability, whatever the case may be, and they move from temporary disability to permanent disability, and it's like you've got to go submit a bid to the Pentagon before you can get the claims paid. And I speak from experience having to deal with that. And you don't know that sometimes going in. So talk a little bit about that and how you help educate and inform.
So when we started at BrokersBloc, we always wanted to be very strategic in what we do or don't do. And so we figured out from the beginning, we want to be experts in medical level funded. So right now, we don't do any ancillary business direct. However, what we do is we set up a partnership with GIS Benefits. They're a national firm. They have access to all the carriers. They're absolute experts in the ancillary space and also enrollment space. Because the biggest thing when it comes to all of your benefits is education, right? If you're making any changes, the employees need to understand what those changes are. And so they have enrollers, they have enrollment technology, and they have all the carriers and the guidance for when things pop up like a disability claim to help with those.
So talk about how that works. I mean, there's this whole array of options you can pick out there. You've got dental, you've got vision, you've got disability, you've got life insurance, which I always found interesting. Sometimes for $1 or $2 a month, the employer can put a $10,000, $20,000 life insurance policy on there. And the other part that I always found interesting was that the employees could actually buy up to a bigger number. And it was always funny to me because you know who always bought the policies and bought up? The women, not the guys.
Yep.
Guys, really, I don't know what it was, but they just can't get it through their head. But the women would always, I can get this on my husband? Oh, yeah, I'm going to get this. Not underwritten straight through, okay? And then you can go up to a certain level. Talk a little bit about that and how that, because that's a piece like when I did it, we had 14 clinics, Shawnee Health in Marion, Illinois, and Carterville, Illinois, and they ran all over rural Illinois. And I just remember doing that whole process. And those nurses and nurses' aides and all the rest of them, they're like, oh, wow, we can sign up our husbands and our children. And they were all over. So talk a little about that.
Yeah.
Why that kind of stuff is really important for people.
Absolutely. So a lot of brokers overlook ancillary completely. I mean, I've even had ancillary reps tell me from my broker days that they understand that ancillary conversation is the one that happens in the elevator after a good medical meeting. They understand it. However, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there because a lot of advisors don't really get that deep into it. They kind of take what they're currently doing and mirror it or match it, as opposed to, hey, if you're just offering dental, vision, and basic life, voluntary life, worksite benefits, all of these are employee paid. But employees, I mean, they really love the benefits and it makes them stickier employees and it costs you nothing as an employer.
Yeah, I mean, I remember on the disability side, I would actually try to get them to do a short disability policy. Okay, and the primary reason, especially is that group I just talked about, they were 80% women. We put that in place and it covered maternity leave. Oh my God. You would have thought I walked on water when I put that in place. And nobody had even told them about this in the past. It's like, we added this in. They've got full coverage while they're on leave, while they're, the whole 9 yards. Made an enormous difference for these people.
Oh, exactly. And that's why it's super important to have enrollers for groups, especially if these are new benefits, because you can add in disability policy, short-term, long-term, worksite all day long. But if the employees don't understand what they're looking at on their enrollment platform, they might not sign up for something that they could really have used.
Yeah, but the other thing is that when they see that how inexpensive this is, that, I mean, the way I always looked at this was, and the way I presented it was, you've got a house payment and a car payment, okay? And whatever ancillary expenses you have on the side of that, okay? When your salary gets cut off because you're on maternity leave or you've got to reduce whatever it may be, and this policy can come in and make up the difference in that, how much easier does that make your life?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, there's probably more people who go bankrupt due to disability than death. So, I mean,
and that's interesting. I did not know that. That doesn't surprise me.
The highest number of foreclosures in the United States are caused by long-term disability.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. And it's such an easy thing to do. I mean, this is funny because I actually have a client that we did years ago who is still on the disability policy we wrote with Guardian. Still on. He's been on it for 15 years and he's on it till he's 65.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so inexpensive. Why wouldn't you?
No, well, it was for them. It made he was in a horrible accident.
Yeah.
He's functioning, but he's not functioning to the level he before.
He's still getting the benefit.
He's still getting the benefit 15 years later. Yeah, he goes till he's 65. I remember when I wrote it, I had no idea. He was a contractor for the federal government in Afghanistan. And we put all of that in place and it made a huge difference. And who knew he was going to wind up in an accident at home on a bicycle after he survived 2 tours in Afghanistan. But it's made their lives would have been a disaster if he hadn't gotten that money.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you lose a paycheck for that long. I mean, how can you plan for retirement? How can you, I mean, you'd have to cut everything out.
Yeah, there's none of that. None of that works. And so, but that's your job, Mark, as the brokers, to go and explain, look, you're sitting here today, everybody's healthy, happy, all the rest of it. If an event happens tomorrow, how are you going to pay the mortgage? If you don't have any life insurance, how are you going to pay the mortgage? How are you going to put that kid through school? How are you going to put that kid through college? Whatever the case may be, that all goes out the window. And so, if you're offering, you're saying to them, broker, These people can do it all for you. All you have to do is go in and sit down with him and let them help you make the presentation and lock and load. And then they come in and do all the work, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's really kind of the message that BrokersBloc is delivering, is that across the board, whether it's on the health side, the level benefits side, or whatever the case may be, is that you guys are actually going in there and making a difference.
No, absolutely.
And that's the mission, and that's the mission that's going to continue.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're just going to keep on adding more products, more stuff to our portfolio.
And adding more carriers and more networks and all the rest of it. And it's going to work out really well. It's BrokersBloc. The website is BrokersBloc.com. Thank you guys for coming in here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, well, I think we're delivering a lot of good information today, and that's really what this is all about. Once again, the website, BrokersBloc.com. BrokersBloc.com. If you want information, go up there. They'll be happy to chat with you. They're really good at what they do, and they can make a big difference. If you're the broker, you're the employer. And now I leave you with this thought from Albert Einstein: the one who follows the crowd will usually get no further than the crowd. The one who walks alone will likely find himself in places no one has ever been. Remember, friends, it's a funny thing about life. If you refuse to accept anything but the very best, you most often get it. Thank you for listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIA Radio Network. Goodbye, America.